Hello guys, welcome back to Throne FC. A few of you watching might recognize me for my Euro 2024 preview series, but since Copa America is very much on the horizon, I decided I at least needed to make a prediction video for this historic competition. As an European football fan, it's very easy to get stuck in a bubble and miss other continental tournaments, but trust me when I tell you, you will not want to miss this Copa America. First of all, there are no teams like Japan, Israel or Qatar. Instead, 6 nations from CONCACAF will round up the participant numbers to 16, giving us fans a true Pan-American feel. Furthermore, there are a few stories that this cup could bring to life. Will Messi and Di Maria have a dream farewell and conquer yet another international tournament like most pundits are hoping for? Will Vini Jr. carry Brazil to its rightful throne and conquer his first Ballon d'Or in the process? Uruguay is also a team transitioning into a new era, and players like Darwin, Araujo and Valverde will want to cement their name as true Uruguayan legends. Colombia, Ecuador and the USA are outsiders, but by no means should we count them out. All of these nations have world-class players in the squad, and it will be very interesting to see if they can live up to their hype. And finally, it's a Copa America. Chile have recently shocked everyone by beating Argentina not only once, but twice. Peru made it to the final in 2019, Paraguay was also in the final in 2011, even Bolivia has won the competition once. So it's safe to say that you can count with a few upsets and surprises in this tournament. But while that's true, don't expect anything crazy out of Group A. Argentina are miles above their opponents in every sector. In goal, there's Emi Martinez, who you can debate if he truly is the best keeper in the world or not, but when it comes to dealing with the pressure, I don't think there's anyone above him. Then in defense, the first name that comes to mind is the improved Cristian Romero, who endured a wonderful season with Tottenham Hotspur. In midfield, it's simply ridiculous. Palacios, McAllister, Enzo, De Paul, while in attack, the veterans Di Maria and Messi are still very capable of carrying the squad, who already has its future planned thanks to youngsters like Alvarez and Garnacho. With all of that in mind, it's very hard to believe that either Peru, Chile or Canada could upset the World Cup winners. Even more so, considering that neither of those teams are living a particularly good moment of form. Chile won back-to-back Copa America titles in 2015 and 2016, but they have since fell off their game quite a bit. They missed the subsequent 2 World Cups, and their run of form from 2022 until 2023 was simply abysmal. However, there seems to be some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Ever since Ricardo Gareca took over, the Chileans improved their form and they're finally trying to replace their middle-aged stars. And if I were you, I'd be paying attention to Dario Osorio, a 20-year-old winger who's the best candidate to replace Alexis Sanchez. He was impressive in the latest friendlies, and I wonder if he'll be able to impact Chile in a positive way. The last South American team in this group is Peru, and if you think Chile is in bad form right now, then I don't know what you'll think about Los Incas. Back in 2023, Peru only won a single match, and it wasn't even an official one, it was just a friendly against South Korea. They did break that goal streak this year, however, if you look at their opponents from those friendlies, I don't think you could say that's a clear sign of improvement. They have a terrible attacking record, having only scored 3 goals in all of 2023, and it's clear to everyone that they still rely a lot on Paulo Guerrero. On the flip side, they're pretty okay defensively. Feyenoord's left back Marcos Lopes, Atlanta United's centre back Luis Abraham, and Orlando City's defensive midfielder Wilder Cartagena are probably the most interesting names in this squad and the country's biggest hope of causing trouble to their opponents. Finally, we have Canada. Just a few years ago, Canada were seen as nobodies in the international football scene, but nowadays, you simply can't look past them. From an individual point of view, it's clear that Canada is the second best team in the group. I mean, they have maybe a future Galactico in the squad in Alphonso Davies, Lille's Jonathan David, who I can't believe he's still playing in Ligue 1, Porto's Stefano Eustáquio, and Celtic's Alistair Johnson. On the other hand, Canada also came with a lot of vibe for the previous World Cup, and they finished the group stage without a single point. If you look at their recent form, you'll see that they were thrashed 4-0 by the Netherlands, but they also held France to a draw. Though Les Bleus weren't playing with Mbappe, that squad is still infinitely better than any other team in this group, other than Argentina of course. So with that in mind, what will Group A's final standings look like? Overconfidence is a bit, and that's really the only thing that could prevent Argentina from finishing top of their group. I think it's pretty safe to say La Albiceleste will get 9 points and coast to the knockouts. Peru are by far the worst team in this group, and I would be surprised if they achieved anything more than 4th place, let alone progressing to the next round. While the 2nd place is kind of a difficult choice to make. On one hand, you have a decent Canadian side who is eager to show the North American giants that they can also be a serious threat. On the other, you have Chile, who were awful just a few months ago, but with the appointment of a seasoned manager who took Peru to a World Cup and to a Copa America final, the Chileans gained confidence and cohesion. Ultimately, I believe Chile's experience will be vital and they will narrowly progress over Canada. Moving on to Group B, which is by far the most unpredictable out of the 4. Mexico might appear to be the obvious choice for 1st place for a casual fan, but don't be fooled by their history. El Tricolor doesn't have an exciting group of youngsters coming up like they accustomed us all during the 90s and 2000s. Other than Santiago Jimenez and Edson Alvarez, there are no outstanding players on the rise, and even Santi, who performs at an outstanding level with Feyenoord, can only count 4 goals in 27 matches with Mexico. They did win the Gold Cup last year, but they have since lost 4-0 against Uruguay, 3-0 against the US, 2-0 against Honduras. I think you get the picture. Mexico stagnated and other nations are catching up. One that's certainly on the rise is Ecuador, and you'd be fooled if you thought that this is just Moises Caicedo plus 10 other players. They have a pretty good number of center backs, such as Leverkusen's Zicampie, Frankfurt's Pacho, and Club Brugge Roel Ordóñez. And those players are all still very young. If you move to midfield and attack, you'll also find some exciting youngsters such as future Chelsea player Kendrick Paes and Brighton's own Jeremy Sarmiento. Venezuela and Jamaica on the other hand don't look so good in my opinion. Venezuela has a star in their squad in Yangel Herrera. The midfielder had a tremendous season with Girona and will want to translate this form into the international scene. But recently, La Vinotinto hasn't been on their best form. While they did alright in 2023 and conquered several important points, this year they couldn't even beat Guatemala. Jamaica looks even worse, as their squad is full of washed up Premier League players and they won't even be able to count with their star player Leon Bailey after a disagreement between him and the federation. So, with the risk of sounding a bit too naive, I'm putting Jamaica in the bottom of the group. Venezuela will likely end up in 3rd place, but they will contest the 2nd place in the group with Mexico until the very end, while Ecuador look like the standout team in this group and should finish in the top position. Group C is where the fun is for my American viewers. The USA is living to their first golden generation with several of their players proving their worth in the best leagues in the world. However, there's a big issue in that team. Their manager, Greg Berhalter. Given the amount of skilled attackers that the country has produced, it's almost criminal how leniently the Americans play. They should look to dominate their region and try to compete against bigger European and South American nations. Instead, they continue to be just another B-tier national team. And honestly, I think I'm being nice. Either way, they're playing home soil, and even though football isn't the most popular sport in the US, I think we can all still expect some massive support from their fans. And they're certainly gonna need it, especially when they go up against Uruguay. After Brazil and Argentina, Uruguay is probably the most likely to win Copa America, and rightfully so. After a decade where Uruguay returned to its former glory, winning a Copa America title and reaching the semis of the World Cup, there seems to be a group of players that are finally worthy to succeed their idols. Say what you want about Darwin, but he's indeed a decent striker that still has room to improve. While the midfield of Valverde, Betancourt and Ugarte cannot be understated. Bolivia and Panama are the underdogs trying to surprise them, and while I don't put too much faith in Bolivia, I would certainly advise you to keep an eye on Panama. There are no outstanding players in this team, but they were good enough to make it to the Gold Cup final and the CONCACAF Nations League semis. In the process, they beat Costa Rica 4 times last year, the USA on penalties, and Bolivia. In the end, I believe they'll repeat their win over Bolivia, but falling just short against the USA, and Uruguay will ultimately earn them the 3rd place in the group. It's pretty difficult to choose between the US and Uruguay, but I'm gonna go with my gut feeling and choose Uruguay simply because they're in better form and they have a more capable manager in Marcelo Bielsa. Finally, Group D is where I think most fans are expecting to see an upset. Most of us look at Brazil, and by the standards that we grew accustomed to, it's hard not to look at them as just an average team. Sure, Vini Jr. is a Ballon d'Or candidate and Martinelli is a beast. But when I look at their midfield of Bruno Guimarães, Paquetá and Douglas Luiz, I can't help but assume they would be bench players in the Brazil squad from the 2000s. Besides, if you look at their bench, it's a mix of talented youngsters who are not quite at star level yet and borderline average players. Then again, I have to stress this. They're still the best team in their group and the second best in the entire competition. But by the standards that I and many older fans got accustomed to, this one is just an average Brazil team and probably the worst in my lifetime. Well, second worst. Colombia looks like their biggest threat. Los Cafeteros possess a good mix of experienced veterans and talented young stars that could even fancy the tournament should the stars align for them. Paraguay has kept the tradition of being a team that's really hard to deconstruct, but nowadays they lack a decent striker like Aedo Valdez, Cabañas, Santa Cruz or Taquara Cardoso. But hey, those last two are still going strong. I don't think it's that unreasonable to call them up one last time, especially Cardoso, who's still bagging 25 goals a year in his home country. In all seriousness, Premier League stars Julio Enciso and Miguel Almirón deserve a mention, and I certainly believe they can escape the group. Costa Rica, however, looked doomed from the get-go. Keylor Navas announced his international retirement just a few days before the start of Copa America, which obviously makes me wonder how worse can their defensive record get. Last year, they averaged 2.5 goals conceded per match, an average that received the contribution of minnows like Martinica and the United Arab Emirates. It's sad, but they're not the Costa Rica that you used to know. They're not the same team who was just a penalty kick shootout away from a World Cup semi-final. Nowadays, they're just like another Trinidad and Tobago. So don't count with any crazy upsets from them. Bottom place in their group and at least 8 goals suffered during the entirety of the group stage. I believe Paraguay will get third, but they might even steal points away from Brazil and cost them the first place in the group. I know this sounds a bit too far-fetched, but tell me one competition where a big nation didn't disappoint in the group stage. And besides, Brazil are still progressing to the knockouts. Moving on to the quarterfinals, and we kickstart things with a banger of a match. Argentina versus Mexico. It's kind of a classic match, and Argentina and Mexico are rivals. At least, that's how Mexican fans see it. But this one should end up as just another Argentine victory. Mexico hasn't beaten Argentina since 2004, and I don't think they're gonna do it now, especially if you take in consideration how poorly they have played in the last few years. Next up, we have Ecuador versus Chile. This one is tricky to predict. Ecuador has a better squad, is in better form, and have more cohesion between the players. On the other hand, Chile looks to be on the rise. Plus, they have a manager who has the experience of going far in this tournament. I got a feeling that the worst team is going to advance here, but I'm gonna stick to my rationality and pick Ecuador to advance to the semis. Our third quarterfinal bout will be Uruguay versus Brazil, and boy, what a match this would be if it actually happened. Two South American giants with a lot of success between them, and while historically you'd have to favor Brazil, I'm more inclined to pick Uruguay. They seem to be more stable and structured at the moment, while Brazil will have to depend on flashes of individual brilliance. Don't get me wrong, it's gonna be a tough match and it could even end up on penalty kicks. But I just can't picture Brazil going far in this tournament with this guy at the helm. Lastly, we got Colombia versus the USA. And even though the US might have the strongest squad on paper, plus the home support, Colombia has the confidence and lack of pressure that frees them up to play at their best level. Besides, this is the ideal time for Luis Diaz to go back to his best self and prove his worth all over again. So yeah, I believe Colombia should beat the US and advance to the semis. The semifinals will provide us even more thrilling affairs. Of course, Argentina looked like the obvious choice to progress over Ecuador, but don't be fooled by their superiority. Argentina might act a little bit too cocky and that overconfidence could cost them, but in reality, I still expect the Albiceleste to progress to the final, perhaps after completing a comeback. The other semi-final will be Uruguay versus Colombia. Curiously, 4 out of the last 5 times that these teams met against each other, the match ended with a draw. So the safe bet would be to assume that the same thing will happen again. In fact, one of those draws occurred in the previous edition of Copa America where Colombia won after a penalty kick shootout. This time around, I believe the outcome will be the opposite. It will be a crazy match, and I predict Uruguay to progress after some extra time madness. So, Uruguay versus Argentina. Easy Argentine dub, right? Well, I don't think it's gonna be that easy. The last nation to beat Argentina was Uruguay, and though I'm not arguing that Argentina has the better squad on paper, there are multiple variables that can influence a football match. Does Argentina really have the same drive that they had in 2021 and 2022? Because Uruguay have a squad full of talented players hungry for recognition. But ultimately, can you really beat Argentina at this point in time? They have one of the best squads in the world, and even if their drive isn't the same, the pressure is also minimal, which could work in their favor. So I'll go for a safe bet and predict that Argentina will win in a thrilling final, perhaps not as dramatic as their 2022 World Cup win, but with madness until the very final whistle. But I want to hear what you think. Will Argentina win back-to-back titles? Will Brazil bounce back? Or will we have an underdog winner? Let me know your opinion in the comments and make sure you like this video so I know that you want to watch more Copa America content. I'm paying a lot of attention to the Euros, but if you guys show a lot of support to this video, I'll make sure I cover Copa America as well. Thank you for watching till the end. I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next one.